Honda just dropped a bomb on the cruiser world. A full-sized touring bike under 10 grand. Not a rumor, not stripped-down junk, but a real steel machine built to ride. Dealers thought it was a typo. Harley and Indian? Dead quiet. Because when a company known for bulletproof reliability sells a bike at half their price, it's not competition. It's a wake-up call. And here's why this matters to you. Because if Honda just made freedom affordable again, your next ride and your wallet may never look the same. Stick around till the end, because what's coming next could change how you see every bike on the road. The wake-up call. Honda quietly unveiled what industry insiders are already calling the most disruptive lineup in modern motorcycle history. A range of full-sized cruisers priced so low that the market gasped. When the numbers hit the screen, the silence in the press room was heavy. Under $10,000 for a bike built with full-size touring presence and Honda's reputation for reliability? That was the kind of pricing riders hadn't seen since the late 1990s. Across the country, phones lit up in dealerships before the official rollout even ended. Mechanics scrolled through early spec sheets, shaking their heads. Some thought it was a typo. No way they can build that quality for that price, one veteran dealer said. But the truth was right there in black and white. Honda had shattered the ceiling everyone thought was unbreakable. For decades, Harley-Davidson and Indian controlled the upper end of the cruiser market like gatekeepers of a sacred domain. They defined what was premium, and they priced it accordingly. A big bike was supposed to be a statement, an investment, a badge of pride. Now Honda was flipping that script overnight. Riders who once thought they'd never own a new machine again were suddenly doing math in their heads. Down payments shrank. Financing options looked manageable again. The word affordable didn't sound cheap anymore. It sounded like freedom. But that sticker price was only the first hit. The real blow came from inside the factories. How the market lost its way. It didn't happen all at once. Over 15 years, prices crept upward like a slow leak no one wanted to fix. A Road King that once sold for $15,000 climbed past $30,000. A fully dressed touring rig with chrome and comfort packages now touched $40,000 before taxes. Even the once modest Indian Chief drifted into luxury territory. Riders told themselves it was inflation, better tech, bigger engines. But deep down, many knew something had changed. The bikes looked beautiful, but the bills felt heavier. Chrome became optional, comfort seats turned into upcharges, and heritage styling somehow cost extra. What used to be a machine for the open road turned into a showroom ornament for the few who could afford it. For working men who remembered the old days, veterans, truckers, welders, the price of a new bike started to feel like the down payment on a house. Meanwhile, Honda watched quietly. They studied the gaps in the market. The riders priced out, the dealerships aging out, the younger generation too broke to care. While the big American names doubled down on prestige, Honda planned something radical, a way to make quality motorcycles attainable again without cutting corners. Those who remembered the old Shadow or the original Nighthawk knew Honda could build bikes that outlasted their owners. So when this new strategy hit, it didn't feel like a fluke. It felt like a correction. Years of inflation, branding, and corporate ego had stretched the market thin. Honda just popped the balloon. So when one brand finally broke that pattern, the old guard didn't know whether to cheer or panic. If you appreciate straight talk about what's really happening in the motorcycle world, subscribe now and drop a comment below. I want to hear your take on it. The method behind the mayhem. There's a reason the announcement hit so hard. It wasn't just about price. Honda didn't slash costs through gimmicks or cheaper materials. They did it through pure manufacturing intelligence. Insiders call it the triangle system. Japan, Thailand, and Ohio working in perfect sync. Frames built in one facility, engines cast in another, and final assembly happening closer to the market. That kind of modular operation cut shipping costs, reduced labor duplication, and trimmed waste that other brands accepted as normal. It wasn't new tech that made it possible. It was smarter logistics. Honda standardized parts across models, meaning a clutch lever on one cruiser matched another in a different class. Shared tooling meant fewer unique molds, faster repairs, and lower production downtime. They applied the same discipline that once made the Civic the world's most efficient car project and turned it toward two wheels. And the results showed. Early test units coming from Asia were built with the same precision welds and finish quality that Honda's American plants were known for. No rattles, no misaligned panels, no compromises. Riders who saw the first unit said they felt like bikes built in the 90s. Solid, simple, and serviceable. While Harley and Indian were investing in premium finishes and touchscreen dashboards, Honda was perfecting the basics: balance, torque, and price. Every decision was measured in cents, saved without character lost. It was surgical efficiency, not corporate trimming. And once those cost cuts hit the dealer floors, the silence in Milwaukee was deafening. If you're the kind of rider who respects smart engineering and real savings, the gear worth having is linked in the description. The silence before the storm. In the weeks following the reveal, panic set in behind closed doors. Harley executives called emergency meetings. Marketing departments were told to reframe the message. Regional managers were ordered to hold pricing steady, but dealers whispered otherwise. Sales teams saw the data. Inquiries were down, test rides were down, and even loyal customers were saying they'd wait to see what Honda delivered next. Inside Indian's offices, the tension wasn't much different. Sources close to the plant described tight lips and tense hallways. Engineers were told to find ways to reuse old parts, reduce costs, and speed up production without touching the styling. It was like trying to retool a battleship mid-sail. Some employees admitted quietly that the new Honda models might be the first true threat in a generation. At the dealership level, the fear was more personal. Managers stared at bikes sitting too long on the floor, some marked down 5 or 10% just to move inventory. If Honda can really sell at that price and still profit, one salesman said, then every brand in America is in trouble. Yet publicly, both Harley and Indian stayed composed. Press releases talked about brand loyalty, craftsmanship, and heritage. But in the garages, the talk was different. Mechanics compared parts side by side and realized Honda's fit and finish weren't far off from bikes twice the cost. It wasn't blasphemy to say it, it was reality. The unspoken fear was clear. If Honda's plan worked, it wouldn't just reshape the market. It would redefine what value meant in motorcycling. No longer about status or chrome, but about access, about giving riders back the feeling they'd lost when prices climbed higher than paychecks. But while the suits argued, riders were already making up their minds. Inside the factory math, step inside Honda's global operation, and the difference is visible in the rhythm of the work itself. Every movement, every shipment, every weld is part of a sequence that's been rehearsed to perfection. One plant in Thailand fabricates frame components using automated jigs calibrated to within fractions of a millimeter. Another facility in Japan focuses solely on powertrain assembly, balancing torque readings like a conductor tuning an orchestra. When those two systems meet a final plant in Ohio, everything fits. No rework, no backlog, no downtime. That precision is not luck, it's discipline. The key to Honda's price advantage isn't cheap labor, it's consistency. Their shared platform philosophy means one clutch casting can serve across 3 models. Supplier contracts are negotiated years in advance, guaranteeing stable costs while competitors wrestle with fluctuating material prices. Shipping loops are planned down to the day. Containers loaded in Thailand on Monday, landed in California by Friday, cleared and rerouted to Ohio the next morning. A single efficiency like that saves thousands per unit before the first crate even reaches a dealer. Multiply that across tens of thousands of bikes, and the math becomes staggering. Where rivals depend on overtime labor and warehouse stockpiles, Honda runs lean. Everything produced is already spoken for. Even the smallest cost-saving decision, like shared paint codes or common fasteners, compounds into a title shift. And when the first shipments arrived stateside, the proof rolled straight off the trucks. dealer floor reality. In small towns from Texas to Wisconsin, the story repeated itself almost word for word. Dealers who had braced for another slow quarter suddenly found themselves flooded with inquiries. Riders who hadn't stepped foot inside a showroom in 10 years came back, curious at first, skeptical by habit. But once they sat on the seat, felt the weight, and thumbed the starter, that skepticism began to fade. "I thought it would feel light and cheap," one dealer recounted, "but it sounded solid, real metal, not plastic." Within hours of the first test rides, deposits stacked up. One Midwest store sold through its initial allotment of 20 units in 3 days. In Florida, a veteran dealer said he hadn't seen energy like this since the early 2000s Goldwing launch. The mix of nostalgia and surprise was electric. Managers who'd spent years explaining rising costs now found themselves answering a different question: how soon can I get one? The crowd that used to only browse for used bikes suddenly had new options within reach. For many, it wasn't just a purchase, it was vindication. They could finally afford a brand new, high-quality cruiser again without remortgaging their home. At trade shows, competing dealers stopped by Honda's booth and quietly shook their heads. They knew what this meant. A pricing floor had been reset, and once that happens, it rarely rises again. But while these bikes sold out, another set of dealers watched their inventory gather dust. The competitor's panic button. Behind the polished smiles of official statements, panic brewed. In Milwaukee, conference calls stretched late into the night. Executives combed through spreadsheets, searching for a way to match Honda's price cuts without destroying their margins. Some argued for reducing features, others pushed for layoffs. A few believed it was just a short-term surge that would fade. But the sales data told a harsher truth. New interest in Harley and Indian models had already begun to stall. A dealer in the Midwest quietly reported canceled pre-orders for several high-end tourers, replaced by inquiries about Honda's mid-range cruisers. "People still love the brand," he said, "but their wallets don't." Word spread fast through the dealer network. Weekly meetings turned somber. Marketing departments drafted new talking points around authenticity and craftsmanship, trying to redirect the conversation away from affordability. Indian's leadership was no calmer. According to insiders, cost audits were initiated across multiple plants, and temporary contracts froze. Rumors of delayed launches circulated through staff chats. "Everyone's nervous," said one employee. "No one wants to admit we got outplayed." The struggle wasn't just about sales, it was about survival. If one company could mass-produce quality at half the price, then the entire hierarchy of motorcycle prestige was in question. For decades, Harley and Indian relied on legacy, identity, and emotional loyalty to bridge their price gaps. Now, riders had proof that performance and dependability didn't have to cost a fortune. Still, it wasn't just about who could build cheaper, it was about who could build smarter, the engineering divide. There's a quiet truth that every veteran mechanic understands. Once a system gets too big, it slows down. Harley and Indian aren't just manufacturers, they're institutions. Proud, layered, and weighed down by decades of tradition. Their factories run on heritage, not speed. Retooling a line can take months. Approving a design revision can take half a fiscal year. Meanwhile, Honda's modular plants can adjust within weeks. That difference isn't theoretical, it's structural. Union contracts, specialized suppliers, and localized assembly once protected jobs, but they also locked both American brands into rigid cost structures. If the price of steel or aluminum jumped, the impact rippled instantly through every model. Honda avoided that trap by diversifying, sourcing parts from multiple regions, spreading risk instead of absorbing it. Their logistics teams treat factories like chess pieces, moving production where it's most efficient, not where it's most traditional. Honda's unseen precision, sensors, zero-waste systems, flawless timing, lets it run lean while rivals rely on manual legacy. Harley and Indian still build with pride, but efficiency wins wars now. fought not on asphalt, but in data, logistics, and relentless rhythm. And that's when the conversation stopped being about bikes and started being about identity, riders re-evaluating loyalty. The news spread faster than any marketing campaign ever could. Word of mouth, garage talk, late-night group texts, riders were buzzing. Suddenly, a $9,800 cruiser wasn't a rumor. It was sitting on showroom floors. For working-class riders, that price tag felt like a window reopening after years of watching from the outside. The kind of man who once dreamed of owning a new Harley but settled for rebuilding an old Sportster could now afford something fresh, warrantied, and built to last. But that excitement came tangled with something heavier: guilt. Some longtime loyalists felt like traitors just walking into a Honda dealership. The bar and shield stitched into their jackets wasn't just a logo, it was a badge of pride, earned over miles and years. Yet loyalty doesn't make payments, and nostalgia doesn't replace aging parts. For many, the decision to switch brands wasn't about rebellion, it was survival. Across online forums, the conversations were raw. "I'll always love my Harley," one writer wrote, "but these prices are out of touch with real life." Others admitted they were tempted, torn between heritage and practicality. A few even bought the new Hondas quietly, telling friends they were just trying it out. But deep down, they knew. This was the first real shift in decades, a turning point between sentiment and sense. And every purchase came with a question no one wanted to answer out loud: the heritage hang-up. In garages across America, arguments flared like old exhaust pipes. One side clung to the phrase "American steel." The other countered with "smart steel." For older riders, brand loyalty wasn't marketing, it was identity. Harley meant history, community, rebellion, the rhythm of the road written in Milwaukee metal. But the younger generation, raised on imports that never leaked a drop, saw reliability as the new rebellion. One retired mechanic from Kansas put it best: "Back in my day, we fixed what we rode because we had to. Now these bikes don't break, and folks think that makes them soulless. Maybe it just makes them better." His words carried weight, echoing through the online threads where debates about pride versus progress turned into digital campfires. No one wanted to say it outright, but the truth hovered. The spirit of the open road was no longer monopolized by one flag. At rallies and meets, the shift was visible. Parked next to gleaming road glides and Indians sat new Hondas, modest in price but proud in stance. Most riders nodded in respect, some turned away. It wasn't about politics or patriotism, it was about meaning. What did it mean to love a brand that stopped loving your wallet? For decades, buying American was both statement and sacrifice. Now, with the quality gap closing and the cost gap widening, that sacrifice felt less noble. Pride still mattered, but pride doesn't pay the loan, and the market never waits for nostalgia. If you want the full picture, not corporate spin, subscribe now. We break down every shift that matters to real riders, from market changes to the battles shaping the road ahead. Stay informed, stay independent, and keep riding your way. Dealers and jobs on edge. While riders debated, the real pain hit behind the counter. Dealerships that once thrived on spring sales were cutting hours before winter even began. A Harley showroom in Missouri reported its slowest quarter in over a decade. In Michigan, a regional manager confirmed what many suspected: some smaller dealerships might not renew leases next year. The problem wasn't that people stopped loving the bikes. They just couldn't justify the price when a new Honda Cruiser cost nearly half as much. In factory towns, the anxiety was palpable. Union workers whispered about shift reductions. A few plants quietly extended maintenance breaks to slow production without calling it a shutdown. "We're waiting to see how bad it gets," said one machinist from York, Pennsylvania. "Everyone's pretending it's temporary, but we can see the orders slowing down." Independent shops slowed as Harley work dried up, while Honda dealers hired and expanded. Suppliers once tied to legacy brands chased new overseas contracts. After 20 years of dominance, the old names were sweating. Honda wasn't just taking sales, it was taking stability. And just as the panic spread through dealerships, a quieter revolution began overseas. The identity shift. Something deeper than market share was changing. The definition of what a rider even was. For older generations, the badge on the tank defined everything. You didn't just ride a Harley, you were a Harley man. It shaped your jacket, your weekends, your friendships. But the new wave of riders didn't see brands that way. They treated motorcycles like tools, extensions of purpose, not personality. To them, practicality wasn't a betrayal, it was logic. This divide grew sharper every year. At bike nights, the generational split was obvious. The older crowd wore denim and leather. The younger ones wore textile gear and open minds. Conversations that used to revolve around pipes and chrome now circled around warranties and fuel economy. Some veterans felt alienated, like the soul of the culture was being traded for efficiency. Others saw opportunity, a way to keep the spirit alive by passing it on, even if the machines looked different. A veteran rider said, "Freedom matters more than brand." His words bridged generations as overseas factories studied Honda's blueprint. From Europe to Indonesia, the movement spread, quiet, efficient, unstoppable, proving that when riding becomes affordable, the real revolution rolls on two wheels. But outside the United States, companies were already copying Honda's playbook and scaling it. The domino effect. What started as a single announcement from Honda quickly turned into an industry-wide scramble. Within months, Yamaha hinted at a new cost-balanced cruiser series that would revive the classic mid-sized touring segment. Triumph quietly retooled its manufacturing contracts to push out a more affordable Bonneville line, and Royal Enfield, the long-running value champion, began preparing larger displacement models to challenge Honda head-on. The ripple effect was undeniable. For the first time in years, global motorcycle brands were competing not on luxury or horsepower, but on accessibility. The balance of power shifted. Markets in South America and Eastern Europe, long dominated by small displacement commuters, started opening up to touring models that regular people could actually buy. Production chains adjusted overnight. Factories in India, Thailand, and Brazil expanded output while Western facilities debated whether to modernize or risk being left behind. Analysts called it the affordability war, a clash not of technology but of philosophy. Industry veterans watched it all with cautious admiration. This wasn't a fad, it was a return to what made motorcycles special: simplicity, independence, and the thrill of earning miles without draining bank accounts. Riders from every continent could now dream again, and that global hope, however fragile, was reshaping an entire economy. But governments don't like disruption. They can't tax or control. Steel, tariffs, and politics. The political storm hit almost as fast as the market reaction. In Washington, trade committees reignited old tariff debates that had been sleeping since the 2000s. Lobbyists argued that the flood of affordable imports threatened domestic jobs, while consumer advocates countered that protectionism was what kept prices inflated in the first place. Caught in the middle were factory workers, men and women who'd spent decades building American bikes and now faced uncertain futures. Labor unions began pushing new Built-in America bills designed to protect assembly jobs. The sentiment was patriotic and heartfelt, but the math was unforgiving. Building everything domestically costs more, not because workers aren't efficient, but because the infrastructure is older, slower, and weighed down by red tape. Politicians promised relief, but few offered realistic solutions. Some called for tax breaks, others for import limits, yet the global supply web was already too tangled to unweave. Across Asia, factories thrived as Thailand subsidized exports, India expanded trade, and Japan proved smart engineering beats prestige. Western brands faced sentiment versus survival, while riders grappled with a truth beyond politics. Every job gained abroad meant another uncertain one at home. And through it all, one truth kept echoing in every garage conversation: the buyer's advantage. For the first time in decades, the power shifted back to the rider. prices stabilized, financing options improved. Dealers that once turned buyers away for lack of stock now fought to earn their loyalty. Suddenly, the average rider could walk into a showroom and negotiate with confidence. It was a quiet revolution, not shouted in headlines but felt in wallets. Used markets went haywire. Bikes that once held value out of brand prestige began to slide, while reliable models from Honda, Yamaha, and even smaller brands like CF Moto surged in demand. The hierarchy flipped. Riders stopped asking, "Is it American?" and started asking, "Will it last?" That simple question cut through decades of marketing spin. Reliability and service access became the new bragging rights. Lower prices brought shorter loans, fewer defaults, and cheaper insurance as reliability rose. Credit unions called bikes investments, not toys. For the first time in years, riders buying smart, durable machines weren't settling for less. They were finally winning where it mattered most. But the real victory isn't on paper. It's on the road. The road still belongs to us. The dust has started to settle now. The charts and headlines will fade, but the sound of engines on open highways remains. Somewhere in the middle of America, a retired truck driver rolls his new mid-range cruiser out of a small garage. He didn't buy it for status or resale value. He bought it because it reminded him of what riding used to feel like. Freedom wrapped in steel, not spreadsheets. That's the quiet miracle of this moment. Affordable doesn't mean lesser. It means more people get to live the dream that once belonged only to a few. It means sons and daughters can ride beside their fathers again without mortgaging their homes. It means the culture that once risked fading into nostalgia has found new breath through accessibility, not exclusivity. No matter who builds it or what laws change, nothing replaces the wind on your face and the hum beneath your boots. The road isn't corporate or national property. It belongs to every rider with fuel, heart, and miles left to live. They can change the market all they want, but they'll never own the freedom. So here we are. Honda just proved that freedom doesn't have to cost a fortune. The question now is whether Harley and Indian can keep up, or if this is the start of a brand new era for riders like us. What do you think? Would you trade the badge for a fair price and real reliability? Drop your thoughts below. I read every comment. If you found this breakdown useful, hit that like button, share it with your riding buddies, and make sure you're subscribed.